Still can't hear, unfortunately, but we'll do the best we can. Anyway, so yeah, more responses to this, whatever, these nihilists, kind of nuts. Different kinds of them, of course. There's this emotional nihilism. Yeah, moral nihilist, antinatalist. Yeah, no, sorry, no sale. Alright, so this is the burning bush guy. So, yeah, I don't think we need to go to the statement before this, but let's see if it was anything. It probably wasn't anything rational. Fire, and then he says, that didn't change. We also have the ability to reason. Let's see if we get to an well, there we go. It's a mechanical voice. I'm not going to bother with that. We were born with a human brains that want to avoid pain. So he's saying the pain isn't really pain. That we are just want to avoid pain because we're made to want to avoid things that are bad. But it's not really bad. You get what I'm saying? He's saying our want is labeling pain bad, but that the experience of pain is actually not bad, and it's just some silly want. So it would be almost kind of comparable to people saying, you know, when you have sex, you want to have kids. When you might argue that, no, I just want to have sex. So he's saying that it's up to your brain, you know, designating what the wanting is. And I would just argue that, no, we just want the pleasure, we want the fun. You know, it is in and of itself thing. So we're back to that argument. I would argue that let's take it out of a want condition, and let's just put pain all by itself. Okay, so just extract enough neurology for the conscious sensation of pain to be felt, and give me no intelligence, no history, no knowledge, no anything else. Just a capacity to experience the sensation of, say, a raw tooth nerve, just being poked over and over. Now, if I had that thing as a thing you could invent, he would argue that there's no ought not to invent it, or ought not to make it, that there is nothing bad about it as a sensation itself. It's the want that matters, not the experience. And I would just argue the want is just rational. We rationally don't want to suffer. And it's not just an irrational want or dislike of suffering. Suffering deserves not to be wanted, quite obviously. So, yes, this is just wrong in my opinion as a description of reality. Jump ahead. We also have the ability to reason, but that reason cannot always override our instincts. So again, this is his argument is that he's making an argument for something, not as a reasoned argument, but because he can't help himself, but think he must do this. He must advocate for the welfare of animals who he doesn't think are really being harmed, that are really experiencing anything truly bad. There's no true ought. It's just that he emotionally feels like there should be, so therefore other people should agree with him and have an emotional experience with him. Again, now if he says that when he's saying this to other people, like I said, when he's going to advocate for something, if he advocates with that truth underlying it instead of relying on exactly this other lie, the very thing I believe in is the thing he's going to rely on to convince other people. He's not going to convince anybody who currently has no feeling, right, and is a nihilist to all of a sudden develop a feeling. He's not going to convince them to say, oh yes, I should develop an emotional need to be, like, that's like somebody trying to make me a homosexual or something. If I could just say, well, look, my penis works fine, I know how to make it work, I don't need to be a homosexual. I mean, I'm already, I can fuck trees, for fuck's sake. I don't need to change anything, everything's just fine. That's what a nihilist is going to say. Why do I have to acquire an irrational emotion to be consistent with your irrational emotions that you can't override with your reason? You understand that there's no real harm, and yet you're pretending, because you can't help it, that there is. Why would a rational nihilist be convinced by that argument, I should acquire an emotion? Why? Why ought he do that? I'm just saying it's going to be a lot more sensible for somebody who already understands their emotional disposition as being insignificant to the philosophical question, and you're just going to ask them, should bad be caused? Or is bad, you could just nail them on hypocrisy alone. Just say, would you want this suffering imposed on your children? Well, what exactly is different between your children and somebody else's kids? What exactly is the difference? And just oblige them to answer a simple question that they can't answer with a rational answer. I mean, how does my change the significance of a child? It just doesn't. Anyway. So around this 1 minute mark is where stuff is supposed to get good. Like in this case, this is just such a brilliant way to make a video. Reality is meaningless. Okay, so he's saying all of reality, including the pain and suffering part, doesn't have any reality. It doesn't mean anything in the sense that it's not a phenomenon that's really taking place. There's no negative thing. There's no positive thing. There's just stuff, matter doing matter, and there really isn't any difference between a sentient organism and a telephone pole. There is no real meaning anywhere. Again, that's his dogmatic, I say so truth. I say meaning is created by distinctions that are significant, and the significant distinction between a sentient organism and a non-sentient rock. Not in a rock, not in a star, and now he's going to say something stupid like not in a feeling organism. Not in our brains or experiences. So again, there's no meaning event happening. There's no special event, significant event. It's not a significant event when this brain configuration happens that creates a sensation of pain. It's not a meaningful experience. It's no different than the experience of no pain having Novocaine. The experience of no pain having Novocaine and the experience of having pain without Novocaine are exactly the same experience in terms of their meaning, their significance, their would be their noticeability. There's nothing to notice. For an intelligent thing in the universe, there would be no significant event. The significant difference between a neutered nerve and an unneutered nerve is no different. I think it's just a preposterous statement. The difference is, in my opinion, quite obvious through experience and quite obvious as a fact. The two states are quite different. Pain, okay, period. I don't know. Is there some other previous sentence? Pain, period. In our brains or experiences. I don't know if that's a comma, I guess. I don't know. Well, whatever, doesn't matter. Pain is intrinsically horrible. Well, there's no point in using the word intrinsically horrible when horrible doesn't mean meaningful. When there's nothing, when you say nothing's meaningful, there's no point in saying horrible. Horrible is a meaning word. It's not anything else. It doesn't mean anything if the word meaning doesn't mean anything. You can't figure that out. And awful, these words don't mean anything if there's no meaning. And it came about because those who avoided it. It came about because those who avoided it, and there'll be something presumably coming about. Why did they avoid it? That's the question. They avoid it because it's perceived as something. They're not avoiding it because it's not perceived as something. They're not avoiding it like a reflex. They're avoiding it because it has a quality. It's just silly to deny that truth. There's nothing irrational in our avoidance of pain. There's plenty irrational about the reflexive response we have when we sneeze or something, or the knee jerk. There's no reason involved. We reason to avoid pain. We calculate its avoidance. Avoided, proceeded, no, wait a minute. Procreated more than those who didn't avoid it. I don't even know if that's true as a statement. There was no way for them not to avoid it, so I think it's just kind of silly to say they were having pain and they didn't avoid it. They weren't having an urgent, obnoxious sensation. The avoidance is not something like I said, you can't calculate non-avoidance. It's impossible for your brain to do that. You can't see it as ever being viable to have the pain rationally, if the choice is in a perfect circumstance where nothing else changes, pain or no pain. The rat will always choose the no pain. This is just an idiotic this just demonstrates how deep your ignorance is. You couldn't possibly create something called pain in an organism and then say those who didn't avoid it failed. No, there was no such thing. It is not true, however, that pain ought intrinsically be avoided. So again, as a rational statement, he's saying that the experience of pain, just as a neurological experience, there's nothing about that a reasonable organism who experiences it, tastes it, obnoxiousness, horror, just the overt nastiness, that it's not something to be avoided, when everything about it is exactly saying that. There's no way to misinterpret it. There's no way to say to the raw tooth nerve being jabbed with the pin that this is something to love, or this is something to get closer to, or this is something to embrace, or no, it's not possible to do that. It has to be intrinsically avoided because it's intrinsically bad. Ugh, duh. That's a completely different, here we go, completely different, that's a completely different statement about reality. I don't know, sorry, I can't make any connection between those two. It is not true, however, that pain ought intrinsically be avoided. That is a completely different statement of reality. No, I'm sorry, the two are connected. If the pain is real and bad, it's rational and sensible and deserving of an ought to say you don't make bad. Bad is intrinsically not worthy of creation by definition. Bad, something can't be bad if it's potentially worthy of creation. So just playing word games as far as we can tell here so far, right? This is one of those cases where it is better that our reason cannot override our instincts. This is one of those cases where it is better that our reason cannot override our instincts. Why would it be better? If you don't believe pain is really bad, intrinsically bad, then how can you possibly say it is better? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. Why would it be better? Why shouldn't we just have the pain if it's nothing? What would be the big deal? Oh, that's right, none. And again, it's not an instinct. It's a reasoned conclusion. We don't instinctively avoid the negative sensation. There's no instinct required. It's by its function overtly negative. No instinct required. we can philosophically recognize that nothing ought ultimately and objectively be avoided. So we can philosophically recognize that nothing ought ultimately and objectively be avoided. So if you create something that's truly bad, and I would argue that negative sensation taken out of my wanting brain, taken out of my intelligent brain, just as a thing existing, would be a bad thing to create. And it's intrinsically would be a bad thing to create. He would argue that no, it's not. You could create just a zillion spinal cords with enough brains to create the sensation of a tooth nerve being irritated. And there's nothing rational about saying that shouldn't be done. It's not a good idea. It's the exact opposite of a good idea. It's a bad idea. So again, but this is just his dogma, right? We can philosophically recognize that nothing ought ultimately and objectively be avoided. I don't know how you philosophically do that, acknowledging the existence of negative experiences being experienced by conscious organisms. And again, so he's again saying, understand, he's claiming to be a vegan and an antinatalist out of something called some sort of compassion or sympathy or some emotional response that I certainly couldn't generate if I don't currently have one, with the knowledge that philosophically I'm exactly the way I should be. Why would I change my emotional disposition? I mean, I can tell you quite frankly, I don't have any real emotional concern. I mean, my emotional concern is pretty limited. I'm pretty much a selfish cunt, emotionally. And if it wasn't for the fact that I factually know that animals suffer, I would still be eating them. Retard. In our day-to-day lives, we live as if there is meaning. Because yes, most of us are rational and personally experience the meaning ourselves. We experience the sensations, and we can tell the difference between the best day of our life and the worst day of our life, and we know the difference is significant and meaningful. We know that by experience. When there is no evidence of any, well again, the evidence is in the experience. I can't interpret my experience any other way. It screams it every minute I'm alive and conscious. It screams meaning. It's flooded with value happening. I can't possibly think it's a TV show. It's a drawing. It's just a symbol of real or meaningful. It's just an icon. It's just a nothing. It has no reality. It's just a drawing of a tortured animal. It's not a real tortured animal. I can't see that. It's not possible for me to see that as a consciousness experiencing sensations. I'm just frankly telling you, there's no way I can see them as lines on a piece of paper. You're saying consciousness is the same as me writing consciousness on a piece of paper. You're saying it's as meaningless as that. I'm saying that's preposterous, and I'm saying it from my personal experience. So you can say there's no evidence. I'm saying I've experienced the evidence. I'm the evidence that you're wrong. But I think and feel that this contradiction is a good thing. So another good thing in a world where there's no meaning. He keeps talking about good and bad. It's just hilarious when it comes to preventing. But I think and feel that this contradiction is a good thing when it comes to preventing. Okay, so there's a good contradiction between the lie and the way we live. So we're all lying to each other. All these people don't really think the universe means anything or anything means anything, and they're just pretending their self-interest matters. And this is good, that we're all faking it. And see, my argument is exactly the opposite. I'm faking it the exact opposite way, where I don't have any emotional need to like anything or love anything. I really don't need to do any of that. I don't want to do any of that. I have no interest in doing any of that. And I'm instead just looking at everything as what's in it for me. And it's my philosophy that tells me I can't do that. So isn't that funny? Jesus Christ. It's hilarious. So he keeps going here. When it comes to preventing, here we go, come on. Oh, he doesn't finish. When it comes to preventing, that is preventing, right? There should be something else here, right? No, nothing. So we should prevent what isn't really bad, because that somehow makes sense. We should live an entire false, fake life, preventing non-real harms, because somehow that makes sense. No, it doesn't make any sense at all. Alright, so let's just go with a couple of little text things here. So I don't know what at 1 minute, you know, Logic Rolls the Dice says there was something great at 1 minute. Let's go back to 1 minute and see if we can find something brilliant. It's not true how that pain ought intrinsically be avoided. Well, again, there's no other way to interpret it if it really is what I'm experiencing. So I'm just saying, if you take the experience of my pain and just put it in something that's not me, no context. Again, he's saying, if I could put it in a jar, pain, he's saying there's no ought not to create that. And I'm saying it's just obvious that there's an ought. There's obvious that it's bad. You've made bad. The more of it you make, the more bad you make. No denying it, in my opinion. No rational way to deny it. Except to pretend it doesn't exist. It is bad. You want to claim it's not bad, even though your personal experience is it's bad. And you're going to just pretend to say, well, I only pay attention to my personal interest because I'm selfish. Yeah, so that's my excuse. I emotionally can't help it. And when I'm sympathetic, I emotionally can't help being a little bit of a bigot and, you know, helping people out now and then if they're the right color. But that's the extent of what we are as organisms. We're not smart enough to figure out there's actually a bad thing that happens, and that it happens when feeling things are in pain. Amazing. So here it is again. Pain is horrible, but meaningless. So this is how he uses language. You have to just understand everything he says. You have to put it into proper context. Pain is horrible, but meaningless. Well, anyway, I have to go do my dinner. I hope it's not mush. I'll be back. Okay, I'm back, I think. Yeah, next day. Yes, yeah, I'm a bit over. Life's a little bit too much for me. Anyway, so back, let's do this comment thing, and, you know, I said sorry about the time consumed by this stuff, but, you know, these arguments are just so, you just, you know, you have to argue it. I can be antinatalist and still a moral nihilist. So even that statement in itself, being anything for a cause, seems just an irrational statement. You first say there's no value, there's nothing of significance happening here, and yet I'm going to take a stand on how the thing that doesn't matter should end up. It doesn't matter how it's configured. There's no right way to arrange the puzzle pieces, is the argument, as a philosophical statement. And yet he wishes to say, I think they should be arranged this way. And he's going to tell other people to change their perception. It's that important. He's not just making it as a suggestion in the wind. He's saying it with some sort of authority, that this is the way it should be. I'm right. I'm right about the thing you can't be right about. By only being a moral nihilist by philosophical and objective sense, in the philosophical or objective sense. So in the proper, rational sense, in the sense that has more integrity. He believes it doesn't matter how the pieces are arranged, and yet he still acts as if there does. There's a cause worth fighting for. Strike two. On the ground, in one's day-to-day life, there are values and feelings. But you know the word value to be shitty and stupid, and the word feeling doesn't mean anything, because feelings are apples. Feelings are water trickling over a waterfall. Feelings are nothing. They're just a configuration of matter. They're insignificant. So you know those things, and yet you pretend in your day-to-day life that these things are somehow meaningful, and therefore you act on it in spite of the fact that you know better. It's like saying, I need to eat food, but you have no mouth to put it in. You have no refrigerator to store it in. You have absolutely no way to use it in any way whatsoever, and you go ahead and walk a mile to the store because, well, something just tells me I need it. Yes, these needs are informed. Yes, these need to be informed well by knowledge in order to avoid bigotry, but that's how it is. Well, again, even bigotry would be irrelevant by your philosophical understanding. You already understand that fairness is meaningless. There's no such thing. It doesn't make any difference. So there's no value difference. Why would fairness matter? Couldn't possibly make a difference. Sorry, folks. Why are you sorry? It's not a negative thing. Bigotry is cool. Why should you be sorry? You're telling me philosophically bigotry is great. It's no problem. It's just as good as smigotry or digotry or jigotry or zigotry. Who cares? Why are you sorry? My way is just as grounded as yours, because yours is wrong, in my opinion. Well, there won't be any rational argument explaining how it's right to be a hypocrite and to use words like they mean something when they don't. So I guess on that ground alone, I win. Because pretty much you're saying they're ghosts. The ghost of value and feelings sometimes scares you into doing something where you think bigotry is bad. The ghost of bigotry haunts you. Yeah, so I say I'm more grounded just because I don't believe in any ghosts. A fellow antinatalist ethicist in Mendham. Yeah, see, I just love that. You know, we have nothing fellow about us. There's no fellowship. We agree on absolutely nothing significant on these subjects. So it would be kind of silly to say that we're a fellow something, because we're not. Doesn't understand how one can be a moral nihilist and AN. Doesn't understand how you could be a moral nihilist and an advocate for anything at all, ever. He has a theory about normative value condition, and that I find to be without support. Again, my argument for its support is the fact that I am conscious and I've had sensations, and I cannot possibly miss their not compatibility. Their difference is not a difference of meaningless nothing. Their difference is what the word meaning means. It's so meaningful. It is not only the source of value, but the source of meaning. It's true. And it's quite obvious to me from experiencing it. I can't say it any other way. Yes, if I never had a feeling, I don't think I could understand the concept of value or meaning. But I do have feelings, and that understanding just seems unavoidable. Can't possibly bend my feelings into any configuration that makes them disappear as meaningful. Can't do it. Can't find the logic that makes that possible. I say there is no rational reason to have an ought to do anything, ultimately. So again, why are you oughting to other people about what they ought to see when they look at reality? Why ought they see purpose in not making silly stuff that doesn't matter? If they enjoy making silly stuff that doesn't matter, why should you stop them? Why should you try to change their behavior? Yes, even when a nail is being plunged into my eye. So he's saying even when a nail is being plunged into his eye and he's feeling those sensations, he'll just know it just doesn't mean anything. It's just nothing happening here. Blah, 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 blah. I don't believe that, but whatever. Pain is horrible. Well, I don't know what possible. How could horrible mean anything? Moral nihilist. Nothing means anything. Meaning doesn't mean anything, yet horrible means something. The word meaning doesn't mean anything, but somehow the word horrible does. The word value isn't really meaningful, yet horrible means something? I don't know how it possibly could. It is the same for everybody. Well, if you're conceding the point that you're conscious, as I'm conscious, it can't possibly be the same because, again, I've never had a moment on earth where I had any doubt whatsoever about the just raw, horrid, obnoxious evilness of suffering. It's just never occurred to me that I'm misidentifying it. That doesn't mean there's any objective ought to avoid it. Well, whether it's objective or not, is it rational, reasonable, logical, sensible? The facts would indicate, all the facts would indicate, all configuration of the facts would indicate there's no way to win by having that. That's not an ought. There's no way to win except to avoid that. I think that's the definition of an ought. Just because evolution implied it. Well, here we go. This is an interesting statement. Evolution is just implying something. so if you have that raw exposed tooth nerve and I just jab a little bit at it, you're just having the implication. It's just whispering. I'm just whispering at you. There's something wrong. Something's not quite right. I'm just whispering it. I'm implying it. No. The universe doesn't suddenly lose its meaninglessness once evolution made sentience. Well, wow, that's incredible. Where's your evidence for that? Because I sure think it did. I mean, when there was no sentient life on Earth and it was just a bunch of little robots smashing into each other and they weren't doing anything that mattered. But when they started going, ouch, it seems to me that something significant was happening that's different. They're going, ouch. They're having an experience and the experience is not good. It's bad. Meaning is now exists because they're having feelings, they're having experience. It's changed. The universe did suddenly lose it. It lost its nothing matters here, and all of a sudden something does matter because things are going ouch. I think that's pretty good evidence. There's no mathematical negative being created that requires a positive. You're just making that up. Well, in the first place, it's used as an analogy because there's no reality you can compare it to because there's nothing else that creates value except for sentient organisms. So I can't exactly go, well, it's like that other thing that has value. It's the only thing that has value is somehow harming a sentient organism, so it's the only thing I can use as a real comparison. So I have to use an analogy to negative numbers because that's the closest comparison I can find. But it's simply a trade. A force of, I could use antimatter and matter, I suppose, as long as you understand that matter's good and antimatter's bad, but I don't know how else to do it. That one destroys the other. And that one of them is a good thing and one of them is a bad thing. Just the way the universe comes, idiot. There's no mathematical nib created by it. Requires a positive. You're just making that up. Well, again, the fact that the pain is reciprocal is demonstrated in every single living, feeling organism's behavior for hundreds of millions of years that they would make these trade-offs. It's exactly the reason why we're sensate, is to create the value that makes it possible for us to do the math to decide whether to get the food or not get the food. What's more important, safety or sustenance? That's the issue. That's the question being decided through the weighing of value. I can tell the difference between a nail in the eye and vegan cupcakes. It's a huge difference, but it's not a meaningful difference. So to say it's a huge difference, but not in any significant difference. So it's huge, but insignificant. And if I was to describe the difference isn't like good and bad, or, you know, fun and unfun, or nasty and pleasant, comforting and discomforting. Can't use any of those words. The difference is in some, like let me try to find a non-value way to describe the difference. Oh, wait a minute, I can't possibly do that. Because the difference is all about repulsion and attraction. It's all about these inverse value tainted words. You just can't use any other words that aren't value tainted to describe the difference. That's exactly what the difference is made out of. So I don't know what huge difference you're talking about. When the only way, well, maybe you could describe the huge difference in a non-value dependent word. That still doesn't mean there's any ought created by the experience. Again, the ought isn't created by the experience. The ought is created by the understanding, okay, that the experience is bad, and the fact that when the bad is happening to you, you certainly see the ought quite obviously, and the only argument being made is that same is same. If the ought exists when you're experiencing it, the ought still exists when somebody else is experiencing it. You won't sense it the same way. You have to understand it. You're not going to have it as obviously told to you, this truth, but the truth is still quite obvious. I mean, the only thing you have to do is recognize the sameness argument. So once you establish sameness, then you see the ought. The ought is quite obvious then. So it's not that complicated. I don't know for sure where my own subjective oughts come from. But even though he doesn't even know for sure where his subjective oughts come from, he wishes to convince other people that he's correct in his non-understanding of his own philosophy. And he wishes it in kind of this aggressive manner. So right there, isn't that a statement? So again, I guess I have another advantage over you in that I quite do understand where they come from, and I quite do understand that they're consistent with every piece of evidence I've ever revealed to me through my life experience. That no piece of evidence at all suggests sensation isn't a real event happening to real material organisms, which can be bigoted. I'm also capable of thinking and learning. Yeah, but what you're saying is your thinking and learning has made you think your feelings are nothing, and that your subjective ambitions are a subjective ought by your thinking and learning is already bullshit. So you've already just kicked that into the bullshit category as a concept of finding anything called the truth. After all, I've been led to antinihilism and ethylism. Well, I don't know whether you've been led there. You're basically saying it's some instinct you have. So I don't think you were led there. Not humanism or Christianity. Well, humanism in the 30 years ago wasn't a bad word. Humanism was a way to say decent without being religious. So humanism was more like civilizationalist. Now, humanism now is more tainted like some sort of human-centric view of the world, blah, 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 but that really wasn't the old definition of humanism was kind of a definition that said what would be the best of human intelligence applied to circumstances. That's what humanism was. Something went right, didn't it? Well, again, there's getting the right answer with completely wrong equation just doesn't make any, it doesn't mean anything, okay? Because you got a positive result after the equal sign doesn't really mean anything if you did all the math wrong and it's not the correct answer. So I don't know what to say. Advocating for something for the wrong reasons is dangerous as a mythology. If you have people believing things for the wrong reason, then there's all kinds of errors that can be made. So if you're not going to pay any attention to doing things the right way, right? It's like you can accidentally change somebody's tire correctly 1 in 100 times. But the rest of the time you forget to turn the lug nuts tight enough, you don't put them on, you make all kinds of mistakes. The fact that you got it right once just doesn't mean anything, because the amount of error created by your other attempts will destroy any value created by the one time you got it right. So an accidental correct answer doesn't really have any value in any kind of permutations over time. It only has value if it's only a one-time thing where you only need to be right once. And maybe anti-nihilism just happens to be a subject where, yeah, that'll work out okay, but there's still no reason to endorse a fundamentally corrupt product, made out of accidents of circumstance. It's still just an accident. I mean, you drunk drive and you happen to hit a compulsive rapist. It's just not any kind of theory where you say, see, I did good. You just don't give you a reward for that. You just don't. No prizes involved. Alright, I'll make a separate video for the other stuff. I have the other logic rolls the dice video to do, and Hothaday made a couple of short but really completely idiotic videos that do require some kind of response. They're just so, he's just such a cheater, just an amazing. But anyway, I didn't know he was a compulsive liar. I just really didn't know that's what he was. He was that, and his insecurity went so deep that he'll resort to just preposterous lies to evade saying, yeah, maybe I'm full of shit. Yeah, it's just amazing. Anyway, so till next time. And such. Yeah, I don't think I'll add anything else here. I already did all the comments, right? I think I did. That's irrelevant to point. We are all trying to explain to and mend them. Yeah, whatever. We are all. Yeah, sure you are. Logic. I have a different point to explain to and mend them than you. Carlos, just another one so full of shit. I mean, resorting now to the, I want to put a laugh track on my videos. I mean, that's just what the sign of desperation, right? How would you use to create that voice? Who cares? What Eminem doesn't understand. This is the one tiny detail that is so critical. He seems to think that if we accept that, then we can no longer strive to reduce or avoid suffering. Yeah, that's right. If you intellectually know it has no meaning, it would be stupid to say, let's avoid suffering, the thing that has no meaning. He misunderstands completely that we like to play silly games with words and pretend they mean something when we already established as a rule of the game they don't mean anything. Nobody is saying we ought to pursue it either. Nobody is saying we ought to, but it's really, Eminem doesn't understand that we want to. And so that's all that really matters. even though our wants don't matter. We have desires, and it makes sense to avoid suffering because it is negative. So, again, using these words like they mean something, in a moral nihilist sense, they mean nothing. So neither of these words mean anything, and yet he puts it in capital letters, the word negative, precisely because the biology attributes and associates negativity with it. So he's saying the biology is just fooling us, and he says, let's be fools. I don't think that's what Mr. Spock would say. If Mr. Spock knew that sensate organisms' welfare had absolutely no real significance, and it doesn't matter whether they're suffering or they're feeling good, it just doesn't matter, I think Mr. Spock wouldn't say, let's all play a silly game of pretending it does. I'll do all kinds of calculations of the odds of our success of saving the damsel in distress, and we can do all this bullshit and blah blah blah, and use up a whole bunch of calories. Or we could just fuck. I think I'll just go back to Vulcan and fuck. It is the pain. Of course, we are driven by our feelings. Again, none of these words have any meaning. But there is no ought present, right? There's no real problem here. So pain, it doesn't mean bad, and pain's not something that intrinsically requires correction. So there is no real driven. We're just crazy and think there's a reason to fix it, even though it's not broken. And yet we know that, but we're supposed to be compelled to do it anyway, because we're too stupid to understand our own philosophy. There is no moral commandment or demand. Again, he keeps saying it, right? And it doesn't matter how many times I say, don't use the word moral and attribute it to me, because I don't use it on purpose ever. So the commandment is written by logical consistency. The very minute you don't ask for Novocaine is the very minute you can say everybody else's feelings don't mean anything. But as soon as you ask for the Novocaine, as soon as you ask for the aspirin or the painkiller, you're conceding, okay, that the ought exists for you in experiencing your life, that you can't avoid the ought. No matter what you think, you still can't avoid it. Even though you know it doesn't mean anything, you can't stop it, it's so strong. And your argument is, the real truth is, the weak philosophy I can't overcome, that can't win, the strong philosophy can't defeat the weak emotions that don't mean anything. So it seems to me it's quite the opposite. That the sensate experience of bad is the truth, and you're the one trying to irrationally pretend it doesn't exist because you want to be a selfish fuck, a lazy, selfish fuck, undistracted by the fact that there's all kinds of slop and shit that need cleaning up, and guess what? You're the only guy maybe available to drive the bus, so the obligation is yours. And you just don't want to hear that. There is no moral commandment or demand to obey them. They are what they are. Well, again, that's just what we're arguing about, so that's a kind of the silliest thing you could possibly say. They are what they are. You're saying they're nothing. Rational people are saying, quite obviously there's something. I've tasted them. I know there's something. I can tell the difference, and the difference is all layered in all those value words. There's nothing else that's significantly different about them. It's all this value shit that makes the difference. That is all, nothing more. Yeah, well, whatever. Do your little playing with the words and the emphasis, even though it makes no fucking sense at all. So, yeah, we'll get to this retard again later. This is retarded, I'm sorry. Yes, this is correct. Yeah. Oh, here we go. What's this? It's an echo trick. Oh, okay. I didn't want to care about that. Yeah. So this is kind of funny. He will use his voice as long as he can disguise it. So, that makes a lot of sense. People are allowed to be neurotic, but that sounds like a really, The guy sounds like he might have even compulsive disorders, totally irrational fears of, like, you know, water is going to give him a heart attack. I don't know. Maybe he has all kinds of crazy notions that have created his horrid, anxiety-ridden life. And yet this is what he chooses to do. Pretend it's not bad to be blighted, you know, by insane, out of control emotional responses. So anyway, so simple, yet this is just going to whistle through their intrinsically valuable assholes like usual. So anyway, that's fucktard Fuckofsky, who seems to be playing both sides of the fence, so I don't know what to say about him. Except he's chosen the right name. Anyway. Yeah, there's really not much else to say. Did want to comment, just for the hell of it. The Violent Vegan, or whatever I think his name is, kind of a crazy fuck. I mean, he's interesting because, you know, he's loud, bad, and animated, emotional. But I didn't think he was irrational. You know, and he does have an affection for me. But he defends this much. He thinks this is a rational argument, that we should be vegan emotionally. Yeah, we should be making emotional appeals, not rational, logical appeals. And I don't think you can appeal without good reason. I don't think you can, unless you know you're right, and unless you know you're right through logical deduction. I don't think you should advocate for anything ever. I don't think you should take on the responsibility of changing the world unless you're damn sure you've got the right answer. I don't know how you can be damn sure you have a right answer when you don't think there is a right answer. That just sounds too fucking insane. So, but yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of crazy people on the internet, and all this conversation, little crazy people float around and they land. And sadly, I think that's all we're doing, is attracting crazy flies. And, you know, I gotta do something about that, I suppose. See, like Piero's room is just totally useless this week again, so 2 weeks in a row, just jumped the wildebeest. I mean, he really just has left the building in terms of trying to do anything viewable or watchable. Because he just let crazy, nutty, you know, Arkansas bitch in to talk all kinds of jibber-jabbery, mumbo-jumbo-y nonsense. Oh, fuck. I mean, he used to try to do that in my rooms. It was just like, no, we're not doing this, crazy person. Anyway, so I think I'm done. I think I've completed my mission. Until next time. It's hot in here, maybe. Yeah, 85. Okay. So I'm entitled to be a little hot. I just was worried. I don't want to be re-fevering. I feel less than outstanding, but that's understandable. I had a rough weekend. So anyway, till next time. Ugh.